Hello, hello, Rhoda here. Welcome to my craft room. Today we're reading the second and last part of the Craftly Hall Journal, and we are starting the third signature, which is page 20. And I think we just left off where um, Jeffrey had given Alice and Rose some medicine, and they went to sleep, and that kind of stuff. Yeah, they had this situation with the bureau when they when Rose pulled back the bureau. There was the "get away" written under the wallpaper. That's where we left off. Okay, so the following night, as her husband slept peacefully, Rose was briefly disturbed by what sounded like shuffling feet across the linoleum of the kitchen floor. Assuming it was Alice and not wanting to bother Geoffrey, she soon fell asleep again. Then, at some time after 2 o'clock, they were both awakened by the sound of gentle knocking outside their room, like someone tapping against the wooden doorframe, and then, with a tumultuous force, it seemed as though something very large and very heavy had been allowed to roll down the stairs. They rushed to the door to see what could have been responsible, but found nothing in the entrance hall had changed and no damage had been done. Turning back to their bedroom, they were then horrified to discover several plates and bowls laying broken on the nearby kitchen floor. Shards of the shattered ceramics and bent cutlery covering the entire space. Extremely panicked, the Binders returned to their bedroom, wedged the door closed with a cabinet, and spent the rest of the night discussing again Rose's previous experiences. Geoffrey, full of apologies for not having believed her, and promises of bringing the situation to a close. Okay, Geoffrey is a believer. He's finally a believer. Thank you, everyone, for coming to visit and to join me today in our little reading of Craftly Hall. Now, here's what I created. I loved this kitchen floor. I don't know, it's just because it's grungy and distressed and checkerboard. I've always liked checkerboard. I don't know why. But, they have this thing about the plates and the bowls and the broken, misshapen cutlery. That seems to be a trend. Have you noticed that? And the rocks and things are a trend. I started making little notes on my pad over here when certain things were repeated. And those were two of the things that I did notice. Okay, so here is a bunch of the plates and things on the floor. And I thought, well, this little lady may have been the problem. She was like maybe the cook or something there at one point in the past, maybe with the what was that first bunch with the doctor. Um, so maybe she was mad about something and started breaking stuff. Now, I didn't make this to where you could write on the back, but if you used a white pen, you could, or I could actually cover it. Now, Jody Lewis also did this thing about the footprints, and she used these Barbie boots to make her footprints, but I had these little stickopotamus ones, so I put those in there. Okay, turn in the page. As the sun rose, they scoured the selection of Craftly Post newspapers that had collected in one of the empty rooms downstairs, since Geoffrey was sure he had quite recently seen an article that had something to do with these kinds of improbable episodes. It was Rose who found the article again, reading it aloud to Geoffrey, and together they learned about the Committee of Psychical Investigators and its most famous researcher, Ernest J. Brundle, a man of middle age, apparently long established in the field of extrasensory and supernatural phenomena. The newspaper reported that he had just completed an investigation into a mysterious case where a young woman had been afflicted by the attentions of a ghostly young boy who would follow her around her home and then disappear as soon as she approached him. The case resolved by Mr. Brundle and his associates on the committee when it was discovered that the poor woman was suffering from visual hallucinations associated with a schizoaffective disorder. Her husband, it transpired, had grown weary of her and had been poisoning her with excessive amounts of amitriptyline administered by a doctor as an aid to the fibromyalgia and tension headaches she had been facing, and thus disrupting the neurotransmitters in her brain. You know, my medical assisting background helped me through that paragraph, let me tell you. Good grief, and I still stumbled. All right. Jeffrey, feeling somewhat guilty following his own dispensing of narcotics to both Rose and Alice, agreed with his wife that it would certainly be a good idea to contact Mr. Brundle. And so, later that morning, she penned a letter to him by way of the address included in the article, and Jeffrey quickly ran it down to the post office in the village. A few days later, they received their reply that Mr. Brundle agreed that, since he would be close to the area the following Tuesday, he would make the time to pay them a visit. He had already, he explained, taken a room at a nearby inn, and after a few more days, of which the house remained quiet, he finally pulled his Ford motor car into the driveway of Crafley Hall. Okay, so on this page, this is the Crafley Post. This is the newspaper they looked through and found the Committee of Psychical Investigators. And this is one of the cases that was solved, and so on and so forth. You can see kind of like a stack of newspaper here. I love this. A lot of people use this in different ways. It was the tag that was on the page. And you've got the file folder I've not done anything with, of course, but I made it to where it looked like there was a really big stack of newspapers here, and I made that a tuck for that to go behind. And I really liked how it turned out. I still need to dress this up. I know I should have done that before I got with you guys. It's just that's the way it works with me. I'll come back to it later on and do something else to it. So over here is the desk in the study, and this is where Rose had written to the psychical investigators. And this was the wallpaper and family photos and things. And I made that like it was a tuck. As you can see, the floor actually is the pocket part, and I glued that on top of it. So, which one is what? Okay. So, this is to Mr. E. Brundle. This is to him. I can't quite make out. I guess it's something about the committee of to the in care of. That's what it is. It's a C/O, which means in care of. The Committee of Psychical Investigators, Devereux Street, London. Well, it took me a minute to figure that out. Then there's the post on there, and the actual wax seal is a crow, and I cut it so it would easily open, and it's got a letter inside. I think both of them had letters, but it looks like this. Let me see if I can read this. My cursive handwriting skills is coming into play, and that also helps me on the deeds when I go over to West Virginia. Having seen the recent article in the Post, we are keen to request your most urgent assistance. We would need your discretion and trust. We can count on our matter not making the local newspaper. We look forward to hearing from you by return, where we can arrange your visit to Crafley Hall. We enclose an area map for your information. Kindest regards, Mrs. R. Binder. The map, I don't know. I didn't realize they had enclosed a map, and I should have known that because I could have copied that off to put back in this letter. All right, well, let me get it in there to where it'll fit. There. Then, Mr. Brundle writes back to the binders. Papshire is the county or the location or whatever it is. Well, this is the way this one was made up. It wasn't a loose flap, so I went ahead and did that, and I opened the top is how I did it. Some people may have like one of those knives, a letter opener. So Mr. E. Brundle is writing to Mrs. Binder. Thank you for your recent correspondence. I can assure the discretion of our committee, and although you have requested to arrange a mutually convenient time to attend your property, I will be happy to stay at the local inn, so we'll be arriving Tuesday next. See you there, Ernest Brundle. Well, how professional, Ernest Brundle. You'd think he would have written a little bit more like his credentials or something along those lines. All right, so these letters get tucked back behind the desk, and we're moving on. The next page. So he seemed... Oh, wait a minute. Where did that... Okay. He had already, he explained, taken a room at a nearby inn, and after a few more days in which the house remained quiet, he finally pulled his Ford motor car onto the driveway of Craftley Hall. He seemed to the Binders a charming man, well educated and respectful of their situation. He immediately got to work setting up his equipment. From his car, he brought measuring tape, cord, electric flex, batteries, a reflex camera, a cine camera, flash bulbs, tripods, string, a torch, a thermograph with which to measure discrepancies in temperature, infrared lamps, graphene for the examination of fingerprints, and several other items. He explained to them how any movement would trigger the camera to snap images, how he would be able to retrieve fingerprints should any items be displaced, and asked them to get as much rest as they could, since, should they choose to join him, their vigil would continue through the entire night. After they had agreed, and after Mr. Brundle had seen the terror in the eyes of Rose, and the worry etched into the face of her husband, and told them to call him Ernest, in an attempt to put them at ease, he too settled that he would forfeit his room at the inn, and accept their kind offer of sleeping at the house once the watch was completed. He had told them that Craftley Hall seemed to him calm and quiet, and that he would be surprised should he detect anything other than the creaking of old beams and the typical settling of a house as the night crept in. Indeed, as he walked through the rooms during the night, while Rose and Geoffrey sat, with some trepidation, in the study, he was unable to find anything to rouse his suspicions that the building was either haunted or that someone within its bounds was responsible for the disturbances. It most likely does have something to do with the unruly local youths, he considered, eventually concluding the night at the room Rose had prepared for him, having taken only a few notes, seeing no lights from the flash bulbs or unusual readings from the thermograph. He placed the notebook on the table beside the bed, lay back onto the mattress, and closed his eyes. Okay. Mr. Brundle has arrived. Here he is, looking dapper with his suitcase. He brought a chest, which was full of all of his equipment, and this was the key that went to it. That's his Ford motor car. He brought some reading material with him. And then this is one of his pieces of equipment that he had in his bedroom. And then this is one of the bookcases that he was supplied to put all of his books and a few other things, his twin studies. Now, these two I didn't have a picture for, but that's another set of twins. Those weren't included in our Craftly Hall goodies. So I always wondered about those two. Now, this, I wanted to have a little more, movement to the page. I was doing the same old, same old. So I started doing a little bit of difference here. So this actually folds out. Here's another piece of his equipment. I'm not exactly sure what each of these things are. This is the camera that it would take pictures of things that you wouldn't actually see. And if you notice with this one, you see the hand of that convict that he was missing that middle finger or that pointer finger. That came up. I'm not exactly sure what that meant for this to come up because he wasn't really talked about that much at the beginning. Here is shelves. This is like, let's see. Okay, here is the cabinet. This is what I figured was the cabinet in his room that he's going to put all of his equipment in. And there's shelves in here. But he actually has a little ghost girl hiding in his cabinet. So we had this equipment here, some cameras, and some kind of, I don't know what these are. He had names of all kinds of different things. But here's his camera, which I love. I love his camera. It reminds me of my great aunt, Ida Bell's husband. He would go around taking pictures, and he had one of those cameras that had that cover that went over their head, and you had to sit there for so many minutes. But anyhow, this is the way I made this. I made this into like an interactive pull-out, but you also have more to it. You have this as well. It comes out of a little pocket right there, and it is a file folder with I don't know who this guy is, if that's Mr. Brundle or if that was supposed to be one of his people he's studying. I wasn't sure what this was exactly. So this has all kinds of things and people. It might just be something out of his suitcase. Who knows? I never had an explanation for that. But I do need to fix this up with rub-ons and such. All right, so on to the next page. Let me scooch this back over. So, page 24. Almost instantly, there came the sound of light footsteps by the bed. Then an unusual rustling, and finally, the clump of something landing forcefully on the rug by the door of the room. Ernest sat up. He sat straight up. He reached for the torch to enable him to see more clearly across the room in the faltering dawn light, and realized that the notebook he had placed on the side table only seconds before now lay open and torn on the other side of the room. He shone the torchlight around the rest of the room, scratched his head, and then went over to examine the notebook, finding that the few pages of notes he had taken since he had arrived at Craftly, and only those pages, were now ripped from the book and had, so far as he could tell, completely disappeared. Although the light in the passage outside the room was even more feeble than that within, as he opened the door, he saw the back of a man who seemed to be dressed as a reverend, quickly passing into the kitchen. Ernest assumed, since he had vanished by the time he arrived there, that he must have made his getaway through the kitchen door and out into the garden beyond. That might well have been the case, he thought, reaching the door, had it not still been locked. Perhaps there might be something to this after all, he mused, calmly returning to his room and looking again at his notebook. After he had slept for just over 2 hours, he went into the village to use the telephone in the post office and then waited for the binders to rise, informing them without describing explicitly what had happened that he had arranged for a couple of other members of the Committee of Psychical Investigators to join them at the house, and they would, if Rose and Jeffrey consented, organize themselves into holding a seance. With their agreement obtained, and while Alice, who had slept through the night, apparently not hearing or seeing anything, prepared breakfast, Ernest made use of the bathroom, noticing only after he was almost finished bathing that written into the condensation on the larger of the two mirrors by the sink was the word "you." It came as something of a surprise when he then found some time later the word "go," similarly written on a mirror above the lavatory. On both occasions, when he had availed Geoffrey of the news, the words had disappeared before Mr. Binder was able to see them. All right, I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to show you this page. Now, this is the room that Ernest Brundle had. This was his notebook. And I used this tag as a tuck. So I just put that down there. Here's his jacket on the coat rack. And this is probably his desk that he made his notes and stuff at. And this was just, I kept all of these from the bottom of the papers as I printed them out. So I used that one up here. This is just kind of like a ripped piece of paper kind of a thing. And then it opens like that. And it just tucks behind there. I have his stopwatch here, or his pocket watch, I should say. Now, this notebook got thrown across the room, so I thought this was where it landed. And this is his pen and a few other things. Now, here is the U that was in the mirror above the sink. And then here I just put this one. This was a mirror, but I put a wax seal with a skull there just for the spooky element. But when you open this, then you see the word "go." So I thought that was kind of cool because they were always giving you these double tags on each of the pages, or almost all the pages. And I thought, well, I'm going to use that as an opener. So there we go. Kind of like a double journal card. All right, let's flip it. I still have some reading to do, I think, about this other page, but there we go. Oh, there we go. All right. For the rest of the day, Ernest equipped the dining room in readiness for the seance, having explained to Rose and Geoffrey exactly what such a thing would entail and what it was they might expect from such an assembly. He told them that he and his colleagues would attempt to contact any souls who may still be attached to the house, that they would try to find out what was keeping them there, and then search for, if possible, a solution to the matter. Ernest had also spoken with the young reverend in the village when he had been to the post office, and it was he who arrived at the house first. Walking around with Ernest, Reverend Dixon explained that he would attempt to perform a cleansing of the building as soon as the seance was complete. He had been asked to perform such a service once before at a small terraced house in the next village and had, so far as he was aware, been successful in bringing calm to what had otherwise been an apparently greatly disturbed household. Okay, we are on 26 now. He had not, however, seen anything like the equipment Ernest had positioned around Craftley Hall, and listened with great interest as the investigator indicated what each item could do and why it was he had placed it in the house. Just as they finished their tour, there came another ring of the bell, and as Ernest introduced his two colleagues from the committee, the final preparations were put in place, and the group gathered around the small circular table Ernest had moved into the dining room earlier in the day. So here we go. They're talking about the small circular table, which we have here. Here is Craftley Hall. This is his little notebook that he keeps, and the way I've fixed this up, here is the table that they were arranging earlier in the day. And then you can write on the back here. And I liked this. This is where I printed it. How did that? It was, I printed one of them wrong. And I think it was the bottom one. Something happened where I printed it and something else came out on it. So this side I thought worked well. You always see 3 scratches when people talk about ghosts, but I thought it looked like a notebook. So I decided over here I would just paper clip that on there for their knowledge. Then we have the planchette. We have all the investigators. We have what they're investigating, that kind of thing. Now over here, I made that a pocket. I glued it here and here. And then it's a pocket. And I just had the word committee from something else. I think from another page I had printed incorrectly. And this is where they were preparing for the seance. They were stacking all of these chairs from the dining room into the corner or something. These stacked chairs worried me for the longest time until I had an epiphany one day. And I'm thinking, oh, they're clearing out the dining room or something. So I said, that's why there was so many stacked chairs. Oh, I couldn't believe it finally came to me. So here's the car the other investigators came in. And so now we're ready for the next page. Ready for the seance. We're getting ready. Now, a lot of people were noticing that this page and this page were transpired in the numbers when you printed these out. So they were saying that they should have been this way. So I've got it the correct way. All right. He sat between Rose and Jeffrey while the 2 new arrivals, Carl Edwards and Dorothy Blakely, sat on either side of them. Reverend Dixon stood at the other end of the table, and with the lamps extinguished and candles flickering, the room settled into an anxious hush as they all arranged their hands flat upon the table so they would be touching their neighbors. And then Ernest began to speak. At first they sat in absolute quiet, with no indication that anything was going to change, as Ernest asked if anyone was listening and if there was anyone wishing to make contact with them. Next, he asked if Rose would join him in placing a hand on the planchette he had earlier left on the table, itself resting on a spirit board with letters and numbers painted onto it. Again, nothing. Now, here is the candles, and I added a little bit of yellow mica spray to them to make them glitter. And this will fold out, and you could write on it. We have a stack of books, more candles, a picture of candles, Ernest Jane Brundle's matchbook, and then a spider and a skull and another candle and a wax melt. So it was a candle page. They were getting ready. Over here, I thank Wayne for sending me this, Southern Biscuits. And he had this really old, nostalgic looking spirit board. So I put that on here. And then I made a little arch. And this can go back and forth. And that's the way I wanted it interactive so it would move. And I was hoping, you can see the no, but I don't think it matches anything else. The yes doesn't work. And then we have another pocket watch, and yeah. So then it goes to the next page. Whoops, I better leave it on this page for a minute. Okay. Ernest, however, was not losing confidence. He sensed, although he did not know why or how, that there was something waiting to interact with him, if only it were given an opportunity to do so. It was then that 2 very loud and very clear knocks resounded across the room from the wood paneling of the walls. That was it, Ernest thought. That was the answer he was hoping for. Then ask if whoever was there would rather they communicate in such a fashion. Another 2 knocks. Ernest asked if 2 knocks ought to be interpreted as a yes, 2 further knocks, and 1 knock as a no, he asked. 2 knocks again. Finally, Ernest asked if 3 knocks could be an indication of the person to whom he was speaking being unsure of something, that they wanted additional clarification. He received 2 further knocks, and then suddenly Reverend Dixon called out in alarm, reporting that he was certain he had felt a hand upon his shoulder. Ernest, immediately grasping the situation, asked whether the spirit he had drawn forward wanted their communication to include the Reverend, to which he received 2 further affirmative knocks. All right. Over the course of the following 45 minutes, both Ernest and the Reverend posed questions while Rose, Jeffrey, and the 2 committee members listened intently. It transpired, as the knocking and questioning went on, that they were in communication with a gentleman who had himself been a reverend at the church which stood on the site in the 1700s, and that he appeared to be a distant relative of the current Reverend Dixon, who was with them now. It was he, indeed, who had been seen around the house throughout the preceding weeks, although his responses indicated that he had meant no harm, but had only wanted the binders to be aware of his presence and to understand that he wanted to communicate with them. He revealed that the source of the sounds, the writing on the walls and the mirrors, as well as the curious movements and placing of various objects around the house, and the throwing of stones, it had all been the work of others, of those poor souls who had fallen into the terrible grip of the plague that struck the area in 1665. They were dreadfully unsettled, the Reverend indicated, not only due to the way they suffered, but also because they had now been forgotten, lost in time, and felt they should be in some way honored, since it had been they who first cleared the land on which later residents had made their homes. As the Reverend Dixon began to tire, Ernest continued with more questions, and finally they all came to understand what it was they could do in order to bring resolution to their spiritual visitors. It would be the construction of a small chapel close to the house and to the position of the original church, and inside would be a plaque or some other kind of memorial marking the courage and achievements of those who had passed in the 1660s. Following the seance and remarkable happenings therein, Ernest Brundle, his colleagues Carl Edwards and Dorothy Blakely, the binders, and Reverend Dixon spent a restful night at Cravley Hall, and consequently there had been no further related disturbances since. So here you can see the plans for the new church, the chapel that they're going to build on site. Here's what it will look like outside. Very cute little church. And then we have on this side the grounds, like Rose decorated and fixed up the little cemetery. She weeded it and planted beautiful flowers. And then we have this here that shows sort of like the church, and then the church and the grounds with the cemetery on it. And then here was one of the, where the plaque would be. There was a plaque to be made about the citizens. And let me see if that's back here. The committee remains in close contact with Rose and Jeffrey, who report that work on the chapel is well underway. The small cemetery has been tidied and will continue to be respectfully maintained. And then there has been a small sign erected at the site where those original settlers had perished to mark its importance as they await the completion of a specially inscribed tablet which will be placed within the chapel. In the spring, Rose plans to plant saplings and a beautiful commemorative garden of perennial flowers in the area, which she hopes will remain a lasting tribute to both those early pioneers and to the poor Reverend. Alice, too, remains at the house. The health of both she and Rose greatly improved, and Geoffrey's factory also appears to be becoming yet more successful. It is what we can only hope to be, a happy ending for all of those involved. There we go. I still have another page here. This one here. There's more about the church, as you can see. And I made that into sort of a tuck as well. I cut it down the center and glued it here and here, and then over here the same way. So I have a tuck here that shows another view of the inside of the church with the windows and such and the pulpit. And then here is, like, I guess the back of the church. I guess, where's the door? I guess the door's up here. Okay, so there's the door. So that tucks in here. As you can see over here, this is the plaque. This is the plaque that they had specially made that went into that little alcove I showed you on the other page. Here is the back side of the little church. And we have another one of these file folders in here that needed something in. But I had to handle with care. And it was not invoiced, whatever that meant. Here was another one of those flames, like an eternal candle. And on the back, we have Craftly Hall. That's odd that I've got two pictures. I didn't mean to do that, but I didn't realize I had. And then this says dedication to all who came before. Now, that was what was, where was that? That was actually one of the ephemera pieces. And then at the end, she gave us these other pieces with all the plans for the chapel later on. So that was like an addition. But here we go. There's Craftly and that. And then the back piece here that's in the gusseted pocket, that is the twin studies. And like I said, that one little set of boy twins, I don't remember that. Now here is Ernest J. Brundle and his partners, Dorothy Blakely, and I have their names underneath there. And then Carl Edwards is here. And then Tommy had gave me these little things, and they were only about this wide, but I needed it to be wider because of Dorothy's card was wide. So I glue them together. So always come up with something if it doesn't work. And then here was Ernest's, like, calling card, his suitcase. That was things that came out of his case. And I just kind of put things around. And I came up with names and family kind of history kind of things for all of these people. So this was Arthur and Amanda Ware. And here they are again. Arthur had a twin brother. So the twins run through his family. So this was his twin brother, Andrew. Arthur and Amanda had twin daughters, Alice and Sarah. And then this was Arthur and Amanda later in life. And I'm not sure if I've got the time period of the clothing down pat. I can tell you it's probably not. Because this looks way, way in the future. And so did that one. But oh well. I was going with my instinct, let's call it that. All right, this is another set of twins and the history on them. And this is Charles and Catherine Chadwick. And this is them really early while they were dating. And this was a little further on. And this was after they married. And this was the home that they lived in down here. And their twins was Cicely and Chastity. And there they are here. And I meant to write a little bit more, but I never have. But you can see how I kind of aged it up. I have this stamp that has like splotches on it. So that's what I did all through here. And I inked the edges and all that kind of stuff. Here's another set of where twins come from. This one is like 2 or 3 generations. This is John and Rebecca Smith. Look how tall she is compared to him. Anyhow, this is John and Rebecca Smith. Okay, Rebecca here is at a young age with her parents. And then her sister Rachel was her twin. But Rachel died at about 3 years of age. So Rebecca was forever walking around looking for her twin. And then John and Rebecca had these twin daughters, Ruth and Rose. And then back here, I think I had started this one and I said Sheridan and Samantha Givens, who are expecting twins. Don't ask me how I know that. But yeah, they were expecting twins. Okay, so I really hope you enjoyed the reading of Craftly Hall. And I had a lot of people say that they're probably going to just craft along and listen to it. They don't have to watch if they don't want to. They could just listen to it. So if you wanted to hear it again, I hope my voice was smooth enough. I feel like it's kind of scratchy for some reason at this time of the day. But anyhow, I really, really thank you for coming to visit. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you to my subscribers and viewers. I really appreciate you. And I hope everybody has a great day. All right, I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.